So let's go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for coming. Today in our webinar, we are going to be going over the 5 ways that you can be attracting quality renters. So that's whenever you've got your vacancies, what are the things that you should be doing in order to be getting quality renters who are going to take care of your properties and pay on time into the door. This is specifically geared towards people for multifamily, single family, and student housing properties. And we'll be pairing up with Tenant as well to bring you some more information on how you can be attracting these renters and where you should be finding those renters. So my name is Rain. I'm with APM Help and I'm an AppFolio expert. And we've also got James here with Tenant and he is the business development manager. All right. So who is APM Help? So for those of you who do not know APM Help and what we do, we are a group of consultants, accountants, bookkeepers, and magicians, so we've been told, with a common goal to clean up the property management industry. So our goal here is to basically clean up the books and keep them clean. Our services include full software catch-up and cleanup. So if you haven't been reconciling or you haven't been keeping up with your books in a long time, we help you get up to date and make sure that everything is in order. We also do on-demand expert consulting. So an expert is someone that did work in did work at AppFolio, Buildium, or Propertyware previously, and has that expertise, that back-end expert level that would be able to help you with any of your software questions. We do also offer full-service trust and corporate account bookkeeping. And we offer daily bank reconciliations and audits so that every single day you can make sure that your transactions are recorded properly and you can make sure that you are able to pass an audit at any given time.
Thanks, Rain. I appreciate you having us on the webinar today. I am James Barrett from Tenant. So what we do is we provide residential tenant lead management and showing scheduling for our thousands of clients across North America. As your property management partner, we will help you quickly fill vacancies, maximize your profits, and grow your business. Our services include answering all the leasing calls and emails that come in from the Zillows, the HotPads, the apartments.coms, generating as many leads as possible, pre-qualifying those prospective tenants so that way we can hone in on quality, which is obviously the purpose of today's webinar. And then we coordinate those in-person or contactless showings for you and your prospective tenants.
Great. Thank you, James. All right, so what are we going to discuss today? Quality renters. So what is a quality renter and why should you care about having quality renters? How are you going to attract the quality renters? So the whole reason you came. We're going to tell you the top 5 things you should be doing to attract those quality renters. And then James is going to go ahead and talk about increasing your availability and how to weed out poor quality prospective tenants or renters. And then at the very end, we'll follow up with questions. So anything that you have that comes to mind as we're going through this, go ahead and pop it into the chat. And then at the very end, we will address any questions that you guys have. So to kick things off, what is a quality renter? Typically, these quality renters are going to have a credit score of over 680. That just indicates that they are going to be able to pay their rent on time and that they're going to be dependable when it comes to that. Make sure that they have references from previous rentals and that they're willing to give those references. Obviously, this is only if applicable. If they've never had a rental property in the past, just try to get references like parents or siblings or someone who would know how they are when they are living somewhere at a residential property. Also that they're willing to pay their deposit and admin fees. So at the very beginning of the process, if they're already reluctant to pay deposits or if they're trying to negotiate a lower deposit or don't want to pay admin fees and they're trying to get that waived, that could be a red flag that they're not going to be willing to pay some things down the road, like late fees if they're ever late, or if you need a repair on the property they're passing through to the tenant, maybe they won't be as willing to pay that as well. So things to look out for. Ideally, whenever you do receive their deposit and admin fees and application fees, you want to be sure that you're getting those paid via cash payment, like cashier's check or money order, because things like if they pay online with a credit card or e-check, those things can be retracted. So if you have a policy where you do not refund deposits, if they decide that they don't want to move on to the property, they could easily just go to their bank and retract those funds. And then you and your owner are out however much money that deposit and admin fees were. So background checks, those are super important, whether you do them through your software or through some other third party, it's totally up to you, but doing a background check on every renter that you bring in through the door is super important. Make sure that they are giving you prompt responses throughout the leasing process. So if they're really hard to get a hold of and you're not able to communicate with them throughout the leasing process, that's going to be a red flag, and that's not something that you want to be living at your property. So when it comes to like maintenance requests, you want to be able to make sure that those people are going to be responsive to your maintenance team and your vendors. And if they're not, that could be a red flag for down the road. Employment and income. So very similar to background checks, you just want to make sure that you're checking their employment and verifying their income and making sure that they're willing to provide you all the documents that you need in order to validate those things. Make sure that those tenants also have few to no excuses. So from the get-go, if they're constantly coming up with excuses as to why they can't pay right now, or if they're saying that they can't pay the full amount and they need to pay it in certain chunks, that might not be someone that you want on your property if you have an owner that likes all their rent up front and isn't willing to work with the tenants to do smaller, pea-sized payments. So why should you care about having quality renters? First off, it's a positive experience for all of your tenants, not just your owners, but all of your tenants on your properties. So this is more geared towards, multifamily properties. If you've got a tenant that is creating a negative experience for all of your tenants, well, then that's going to create a negative experience for everybody involved. And then that's going to lead to low reviews, and then therefore probably not as high of leasing on that property due to negative experiences. You'll have happier owners. They're getting paid on time. Everything is working as it should, and there are no complaints with them. They also get on-time statements. The statements make sense. You're not having to explain, different weird applications of payments from prior months, like part of May is being paid in July. Just eliminates all of that confusion. Less work for you and your team. You're not having to send out as many letters. You're not having to go door to door to try to figure out why their payments aren't being made and collect on that rent. So having quality renters is going to give you guys time back to focus on things in office and get those things done. It's also going to lead to higher occupancy rates because you're going to have higher reviews, better word of mouth among other people within the community saying that it's a great place to live. And then you're going to have happier owners because of that as well. It's going to also put you in a more competitive advantage because obviously everybody around you is going to want to have high occupancy rates, and people are then going to compete against you, and that can also allow you to increase your rent because now you've placed yourself at a competitive place. Easier unit turnover process. So if you have a quality renter, they're not trashing the place, they're not staining the carpets and the walls and making you basically do a complete remodel at the end of every unit process, or at the end of every move in or move out. So makes that easier. Next thing, we're going to go ahead and talk about the things that you should be doing to get these quality renters in the door. The first thing is quality photos. So, you want to maybe hire a professional photographer. It's only about $110 to $300 per session. If you can't afford a professional, then you can use your iPhone. They have very high quality photos nowadays, or you can just buy your own high resolution camera to use on your properties. It's all about the angle. So as you can see on the example, it makes the room look larger. So make sure you're doing things at the right angle, make sure that you have the right amount of lighting. So you want to make sure that you open up the windows and turn on all the lights so that it doesn't seem like a dark and dim small space. Don't forget closets and small spaces because those things matter to renters, and they want to see where they can store things, how much storage is going to be on the property. Make sure you include all rooms because people with children are going to want to see the options for their own children. And include the exterior. Curb appeal is super important. You could have someone that's completely interested in a single family home, but when it comes down to it, if they get to the property and they're not appealed to the exterior because it wasn't listed on the property, you've then wasted your time going to a property that they're not going to even move into. So that includes both the front and the backyard because it could have animals and it could be important for them to have a running space. And then don't forget amenities. So that includes parking, the parking lot, parking options, so garages, pool, gym, laundry, pet area, anything that you guys have that's going to be an added bonus to your tenants and make their lives easier, you want to be showcasing on the listing along with the unit. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're being descriptive. So along with the photos, you also want to be describing those amenities. When was everything updated? Have you guys done renovations lately? What did those renovations include? What's your pet policy? Include the weight limits if you have any, as well as breed restrictions. parking options to make sure that, again, you're including if you have covered parking, if it's just open parking, what does the parking policy look like? And fluff it up. People always say fluff is bad, but you want to make sure that you're setting your property apart from the rentals next door. You don't want to just keep it blank and make it very minimal. You don't want to say, oh, hardwood floors, stainless steel appliances, that's it, come check us out. You want to make it very appealing, make it exciting, make it something that someone's like, wow, this sounds like a fun and great place to live. So talk about, again, what are the amenities that the community offers? What are things that I'm going to get here that I'm not going to get at another place? Is there free coffee? That could be something that's a really big benefit to someone who has an early morning and they just want to stop by and get some coffee and not do it at their own apartment. So some examples of that would be, this is obviously a very vague example, but good is first month's free, and it has all the description of the property. It really fluffs it up. It says sparkling pool, fully stocked gym, covered parking. So use, big, bright adjectives that are going to liven up the description, and then include all of your pet policies below and make it readable. So don't lump it all into one paragraph, break it up and make sure that it is very readable and digestible for the potential renter. A bad example would be down below. Again, it's very vague. They have a virtual tour link, which is great, but again, it doesn't really drag you and it doesn't make you want to learn more about the property and potentially do a tour. So the next thing, and especially, around COVID and people not being able to do tours, virtual and 3D tours have become a really big thing because it gives you guys 24/7 availability, not just your 9 to 5 office hours. It gives trust with the potential renters because you're taking the time and the money to invest in doing a 3D or a virtual tour, and that shows that the property is willing to invest in their potential renters. It frees up the leasing team schedule, so instead of them having to make time for showings and go take time out of their day to do that, now they're able to send people links to virtual tours, or even just have multiple people join in on a Skype or a Zoom where they can go and walk through the apartment. It also eliminates any unqualified and uninterested tenants. So if you're walking through, obviously that weeds out people who are not interested in the layout in person, or when they're doing a 3D tour, maybe they don't like the layout, maybe they don't like the floors, little things like that. It also gives people a chance to imagine themselves residing there, imagine their furniture in there. So it's really important to offer both stage and unstaged virtual and 3D tours so that people can see themselves living there, but also if you have it staged, it gives them an idea of what can fit into the space. It also gives you a competitive advantage. So if your competitors or your properties around in the same area are not offering 3D or virtual tours, that already gives you a huge tick up in the residents' books. It typically leads to 2 to 3 more leads with the virtual tour option. So as you can imagine, that's something that everybody wants, and that's something that will really bring in leads more so than the property next door. One tip that I would recommend is a lot of companies do offer packages. So some options are Envision Studio and Edge. What those companies do is they not only do 3D and virtual tours, but they'll also do photography for your properties. So like I mentioned in point number 1, you want to have professional photos. If you find a company that does all of it, then you'll end up saving time and money. So definitely a great option. An alternative is to buy your own 3D equipment. It tends to range between $300 to $400. You can get that on Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, but if you decide not to hire a professional company, it is a great idea, again, to buy your own equipment so that you can do it for your units moving forward. All right, and then the fourth thing here is competitive pricing. So you want to make sure that you're doing your research in your area to see what other units like yours are going for. You want to look for listings on Craigslist, listing sites, so like Zillow, apartment.com, things like that, Facebook. And then you want to be specific about the comparables. So square footage, you want to make sure that that's something that aligns with your units. If it's significantly smaller, that's not something you're going to want to look at. You want to look at the amenities, has it recently been remodeled? Is it older? When was it built? All of those fun things. Consider the cost of vacancy. So you want to make sure that you're considering how much is it going to cost you for that unit to be vacant, and you want to make sure that you're pricing it to where when it is occupied in the times of vacancy, you're not at a total loss. And then you also want to offer incentives. So first month's free, things like that, to attract more renters and to get them in the door and entice them to choose your property over someone else's. And don't be afraid of change. So, if your pricing is really working well for the last 5 years, your incentives that you're offering have really worked well for the last 5 years, but the property next door is starting to raise their prices, or, maybe they're not offering incentives anymore, but what you're doing is working. Don't be afraid of change, because, maybe raising your rent or changing an incentive might slow down the leads, but it could bring in more quality renters, which at the end of the day, that's your goal. Okay. And then the last thing here is, don't be afraid to do minor updates. This is something that is huge in the eyes of a renter. It doesn't have to be lavish. So it doesn't have to be, marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, hardwood floors throughout. It can be laminate, it can be vinyl, it can be faux counters. So there are tons of alternatives for faux countertops now. Cheap landscaping, so like things like shrubs that fill up a lot of space, but they're not super expensive. All great alternatives and ideas in order for you to boost your properties. Get smart alternatives, so things like a Nest thermostat, little things that make the property safe, so a security system, things that will make people want to move into your property because it's safe, and then also it's not something that they're going to have to install on their own. Spend time and money where it matters. So that's going to be things like your kitchens, your bathrooms, your closets. So having a good storage system in the closet, if it's a small space, maybe doing something like a California closet, flooring and paint. So again, it doesn't have to be anything lavish. You don't need to go in and start replacing all the doors with solid wood corridors. Don't be crazy like that. Just the basics. What are people looking at? What's going to matter? And it needs to be clean. Once again, if you increase your competitiveness with minor updates, you can also increase your pricing. So it's a win-win. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to James with Tenant Turner.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. A couple of things to just touch on from what you shared is those 3D virtual tours. Those are huge right now. At one point, they were more of a novelty within the industry. Somebody actually just mentioned in the comments about Astroom as an alternative. Obviously, Planomatic is a service that can actually do the tours and do the professional photos for you. Matterport certainly popularized it. And even Zillow offers a free 3D tour tool. And the great thing about that is it drives more interest in your listings. If you have them on your website, it increases your page views, increases your time on site by your prospective tenants, which ultimately helps with SEO. So many benefits to doing those 3D virtual tours. They're not as prohibitive as they once were. So, but yes, I am James with Tenant Turner, and as mentioned before, we provide leasing automation software. So a lot of the data I'm going to share with everybody today is straight from our system or our partners, like our feed partners that we market listings to. So with Tenant Turner, we've seen millions upon millions of leads. We've helped thousands of property management companies. So we have this abundance of data. This is nationwide and Canadian data. Obviously, each market can be a little bit different, but the ultimate goal of today's discussion is just to drive home the importance of quality and finding your tenant, and to give you guys some best practices for how you can actually do that. So first things first, let's make sure that when we market our properties and we've got these beautiful virtual tours out there and we're driving interest in those different rentals, that we don't let the quality prospective tenants slip away. This is a huge issue within our industry where we unfortunately don't give the tenant leads as much attention as they probably want. But there's so many of them. And that's actually why we created Tenant Turner. For every 100 leads that inquire about a new listing, really only half of them are going to be a good fit at best. And then ultimately you're only going to pick one of them. So how do you accelerate your time to finding the most qualified prospective tenant for your property? First thing is making sure that you're replying to them quickly. You do not want to lose out on a quality lead because you didn't respond to them fast enough. According to Zillow, you're 40% more likely to engage with a prospective tenant if you can reply in 1 to 2 minutes than if you wait a day or more. And I know that sounds almost impossible, but using tools like Tenant Turner, we are able to provide personalized, instantaneous, property-specific responses to emails, texts, and give people who call in an option to self-schedule regardless of time of day. So leverage technology in order to meet the needs of those prospective tenants so you don't lose out on the good ones. At the very least, you should be setting up phone trees, automated messages, making sure people can use your website to schedule tours, and setting up auto responses on your email. Even if they can't be personalized, just really give people the information that they want so they don't go looking at one of your competitors' properties and you lose them altogether. You see, even responding to them within 30 minutes, which you might think, man, that's really good, I got back to them pretty quickly, you're still going to lose some level of engagement. And if you wait until the next day, you're really going to be in a tough spot. And anything over 24 hours, 20% of the leads that inquire, that's 1 out of every 5 prospective tenants that inquires about your property, they're just going to walk. It doesn't matter how great your property is. All those things that Rain just shared about having amazing amenities and a great description, if you lose 1 in every 5 people who you've just encouraged to inquire, you're going to be in a tough spot in order to identify a quality candidate. So if you're using tools and technology and you've got your virtual tours and you're marketing the properties well, you're going to get a bunch of leads. Again, not all of them are going to be a good fit. As I stated, about 50% of prospective tenants that come through Tenant Turner, they're either not really interested, basically they stop engaging with the software, stop engaging with the property manager, or they're not qualified. So no surprise that for the folks that aren't qualified, the number one reason is income. So 28% of the prospective tenants that inquire about a property through Tenant Turner and go to schedule a showing and we pre-qualify them get disqualified because their income to rent ratio does not meet the standards set by the property management company. And just know that when we talk about quality, we're really talking about fit. So if you have a Class C property in Connecticut, a person with a government housing voucher but has always paid their previous rents on time, and is looking to move in quickly, that's probably a pretty good fit. If you have a Class A property in Texas, you might be looking for other items to define what your quality is and what your fit is. So just know that's a sliding scale depending upon what your true criteria needs to be. But certainly for fair housing rules, make sure you set your criteria up front. You configure your software appropriately and train your staff to make sure you're identifying quality in a fair housing compliant way. And then continue to monitor what seems to effectively weed out people who ultimately aren't the right fit for your property. You don't want to spend, hours driving to a showing, seeing somebody at a property, encouraging them to apply, collecting their $40 application fee, just to find out that their move-in date's 3 months away, or just to find out that they have a previous eviction, aren't going to be able to adhere to your pet policy. As you can see here, pets is another big reason that people get disqualified for a property. And within Tenant Turner, obviously you can configure different pet qualification criteria. Maybe it's the size of the dog, maybe it's dogs versus cats, maybe it's the quantity of the pets, or maybe it's just having pets in general may become a disqualification criteria for you. All those things will definitely help you weed out the prospective tenants who are not a good fit, and then ultimately get the ones who are a good fit scheduled to go see your property and ultimately apply. Another best practice to get quality tenants in your property are to leverage contactless showings. If you ask any property management company out there, one thing that may define quality is being employed, having a job. So I'm at work, Rain's at work, you guys are at work, we're all quality tenants, right? So when you only show your properties during your business hours, you're creating an inconvenience for your prospective tenants, and that they can only go during 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, when they're also at their jobs. With contactless showings using electronic locks and lock boxes, you're able to allow people to go view the property on nights and weekends. In fact, 26% of contactless showings happen on the weekend, when you'd rather be with your family, maybe doing a couple day trips or a weekend away versus showing property. And one interesting thing is on Sundays, we actually see about 200% more self showings compared to in-person showings, because obviously everybody wants to take that day of rest for themselves. But that means you're missing out on a huge opportunity to get those properties leased more quickly, and again, to better qualified candidates. Here, I'll call out the fact that you can use electronic lock boxes like the one you see there. That's a Sentry Lock brand lockbox to the right. We have a Code Box branded lockbox on the door. But like Rain had mentioned, there's also smart locks, which can be an amenity that will help you market the property and identify quality candidates, but then you can use those for your prospective tenants to do self-tours. You can use those for your vendors to be able to access the property without having to come pick up a key. And because all of these generate unique one-time use codes, they're far more secure than, say, a contractor lockbox when allowing people to access the properties. With self-showings, you're able to expand your availability, not just into the weekend, but also during the week. As you can see by this graph, in Tenant Turner, we see that, for the most part, in-person showings are able to keep up with those self-access viewings at about the same pace throughout the day. But then at 4 o'clock, something happens. Happy hour. Happy hour happens and our leasing agents are ready to get out and not necessarily show any more properties. But that's also the time that our prospective tenants would like to go view the properties after they get out of work. So at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and you can see on to 8 and even 9 o'clock, you can have these properties be looked at on their own without anybody having to be there to show them that property. So again, good quality candidates who are employed, who are busy during the day, can still access your rental properties and can take a look at them on their own. Another best practice when it comes to identifying quality tenants is making sure you're tracking your metrics. So as Rain alluded to before, there's a lot that you can do on the marketing side in order to drive a volume of quality candidates. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do for you by marketing your property to as many listing sites as possible. We've got Zillow, we've got Zumper, we've got Hotpads and Truly and Apartments.com, and all these various sites that have driven a lot of leads through our system in order to get scheduled. But by tracking your metrics, you will better be able to identify what matters. And in our case of today's webinar, quality. Here you can see that Zumper accounts for 36% of the tenant leads that come through Tenant Turner. That's largely driven by their partnership with Facebook Marketplace. So Zumper really didn't see but so much traffic. It was maybe more like a realtor.com or an apartments.com until a couple of years ago when they partnered with Facebook Marketplace in order to have those listings automatically posted. Now you can see a significant number of leads are generated through the Zumper network, which includes PadMapper and Facebook Marketplace. But by tracking our metrics, by analyzing our reports, we can actually see that of those people who were identified as signing a lease through Tenant Turner, only 19% actually came through Zumper and over 50% came through Zillow. So it's one thing to get a quantity of leads and be able to monitor those metrics. It's another thing to be able to identify quality of leads. And so ultimate goal there, make sure you're tracking your leasing funnel, make sure you're monitoring it, but all the way through to the end when you've picked an applicant and you've gotten them to sign the lease. This ensures that you're spending your money on the appropriate listing site, as Zillow, Truly, and Hotpads are now paid. It certainly ensures that if you're using a tool like rentals.com or apartments.com or any other paid listing site, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And ultimately, you're going to be able to get good quality candidates for your properties. Now I'm going to kick it back over to Rain to talk a little bit about how other tools that maybe you guys are using for your property management software can provide reports that would certainly help identify quality candidates for you to rent to.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, I loved your point too about, quality. It depends on your area. It's not going to be the same across the board. So definitely look at, your fair housing and make sure that you're not saying quality is blanket across the board. It is definitely a sliding scale. So thank you for that. That was very useful. So talking about reporting, we want to be able to make sure that you guys are able to track, what's going on as you guys are making these changes and that as you guys are paying closer attention to your leads. So within AppFolio, there are 3 options. You've got your unit vacancy detail, basically to show you what units are vacant and give you information about the last rent amount that they were charged, their market rent, when they were last leased, so that you can get an idea of how long things have been vacant and what it looked like whenever they were last leased. What was their deposit And is it something that you guys are able to increase? The metrics section, so that's under reporting and then metrics. This is a section that not a lot of people know about. It's something that AppFolio added probably 2 years ago, but it is very useful. It's a great place for you to look at your pricing metrics to make sure that you are staying competitive and that you're making enough money on your properties to cover your expenses. So great place to look at those. And then finally, your occupancy summary. That's a really good way to look at a snapshot of your properties to see, based on unit type, how are these things being rented, what percentage of them are occupied, and then that way you can keep a close eye on how you're performing. So once you make all these updates, it's really good. I recommend to run the occupancy summary, once every so often, just to make sure that your occupancy rate is staying at where you want it to be, and just make sure that you don't need to tweak anything like pricing or maybe, advertise on more sites or change your description. So just keep an eye on those things. And then within Buildium, there are 2 options. There's a summary tab of the rent roll page. So if you go to your rent roll, you'll be able to see a summary of all of your units and then be able to see what their occupancy rate is, as well as the amount of rent that you're charging, and then any of their lease details. So very similar to AppFolio's unit vacancy detail. Also, the analytics tab, which is available to premium only Buildium subscribers, will show you more on, your occupancy, your market rate, and your market rent compared to what you are charging for rent. And so if you're having any loss there or how long the units have been vacant, it's a great options. Within PropertyWare, you have 2 options as well. Your gross potential rent report, which will say how much you're gaining, how much are you losing, allows you to look at your performance. So you can see your loss to market, loss to vacancy. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that your vacancy cost is covered by what you're charging whenever the unit is occupied. So your gross potential rent report will be a great way to check that. Also, the unit availability detail is great for being able to see your leasing history. So like I mentioned with Buildium and AppFolio, how you're able to go back and see what you were previously charging. See maybe if you had any loss on that previous vacancy, you can check that out on the unit availability detail. So one thing I did want to, overall picture here is obviously money. What is going to be your return at the end of the day if you were to make all of these investments in your property, make renovations? Is it actually going to be worth it? So a way that you can simply check that, this is a very basic calculation. There are definitely more intense calculations that you can do, but just to give you an all-around ballpark number figure on your return on investment, what you would do is, let's just say you hypothetically buy a single family home for $250,000. You put a 20% down payment of $50,000, closing costs are 4%, which is about $10,000. Cost of improvements, let's just hypothetically say, you change the flooring a little bit, you put in vinyl, you paint the walls, all of that, paint the cabinets, that costs $8,000. Cost of marketing items, so photography, 3D tours, virtual tours, comes out to $650. All in all, your total investment on this property is $318,650. Now, let's hypothetically say your mortgage is $1,400 per month. On average, you can rent properties for about 0.8% of the value, or 8% of the total value. So we look at your total investment of $318,000. That gets us around $220,000, assuming that the post reno makes the value of the house $275,000. So then what we do is we look at on a monthly rate. We take your total amount that you're charging in rent, less your expenses, so that's your mortgage and your repair costs. And then we divide that by your initial cash investment, which is your down payment, your closing costs, your cost of improvement, and your marketing items. And we're at a return of investment of about 12.45%. So on average, you want to see about 10 to 12% return on investment. Anything above 12% is considered a great return on investment. So this is something that you can find online. I know I kind of sped through that. So if you are curious to calculate your return on investment, this is something that's very quick and easy to do. And if you're not sitting at 12% or over, don't fret. Again, these are things that can be improved upon. You can invest in your marketing, you can invest on your property and get that ROI up. And now I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that you guys may have. It does look like we did have a question come through for Tenant Turner.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I can see a couple of those from All American Realty. Thank you for those questions. So one around the look and feel of Tenant Turner. So Tenant Turner uses Google Material Design. So if you're familiar with Google Apps and Google products and you use those on a regular basis, that's probably the look that it's most consistent with. So that's regularly updated. But of course, if you have any feedback or anything that you think would be useful for us, let us know. We track all enhancements and are always looking to hear what people are looking for. And then the other question was pulling those stats for rentals at a Tenant Turner. Absolutely, that's definitely data that's in there, but it does require you, when you deactivate a rental, you select the tenants that are in Tenant Turner that you are ultimately going to rent to, and then they get flagged as selected in your lead source report, and then that data would be available to you in your lead source report, either directly in Tenant Turner or exported into a CSV or Google Sheet or whatever tools you'd like to use that in.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you guys do have any other questions that come up, please feel free to contact either myself or James. Our contact information is here on this slide. So we'd be happy to help if you guys have any questions, or, if you're not seeing results after following these tips, then definitely let us know. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Bye.